Now tell me, what is the evidence that anyone has if he actually traveled across the Islamic region, Hijazi and so on, to actually speak to people there? Is there any evidence?
I'm not sure.
There's none.
We have many things that people have passed down,
Like what?
like the Quran itself.
You're claiming. What's the evidence?
I'm not sure of the evidence.
In other words, Hendrix, I'm going to. The reason I'm asking, how do you know this wasn't made up?
I understood that 3 in 1 doesn't, like, even without these online people, it doesn't make sense to me, because how can you have 3 in 1 which are different but the same?
How old are you?
16.
16. Are you still in school? A level?
Yes.
A level. So, are you familiar with this notion called infinity?
Infinity, yes.
Just quickly before I go anywhere else, infinity plus infinity plus infinity, what is that?
Infinity.
Just one infinity.
It's the same, yeah.
Even though you've added 3 infinities. How is that?
It's the same.
How? If you've added 3 infinities, infinity plus infinity plus infinity, you've added 3 infinities, how do you just get 1 infinity?
But it's meaningless because the word infinity, you cannot have more infinity or less infinity.
So, but if you have added, in mathematics, have you ever come across an equation, infinity plus infinity? Can you have that equation?
No, you cannot have that.
You can't?
You can't have infinity, it's the same thing.
Actually, you do.
My dear friend,
You do.
in mathematics,
In
can you...
engineering, at least you do.
Absolutely. In mathematics, in an equation, can you have infinity in multiple places?
In multiple places, yes.
Yeah. So, but there is only one infinity, but you can have it in multiple places. So, you can have
It's the
infinity.
same infinity.
No one said same. I'm saying, please, infinity plus infinity plus infinity. What's the result? No, don't trust. Don't trust. Look at, don't trust.
Don't trust.
Don't trust. Infinity plus look at him. Don't trust. He doesn't understand private personal space, so don't trust. Infinity plus infinity plus infinity. One infinity.
Yes.
With finite beings, with finite persons, when you have two persons, you, the gentleman near me, we are 3 separate persons. We are separate.
Yes.
When you go home, when I go home, we're not connected in any manner, shape or form. Even now, we're not, of course, connected in, excuse me, what are you doing? In any manner, shape or form. We're not, yeah? So we are finite beings, we are disjoint, we are disconnected. So with 3 persons coming together, we are 3 persons. Okay. There is never a case where 3 come together, and it is 1 person. Impossible. With God is not a finite person. Okay. He is an infinity. Yes. And with infinities, many things which are otherwise weird with finite things are actually true. For example, you add 2
Mathematically,
infinities.
at least. Mathematically,
And
at least.
mathematics is solid
that
science.
True. And I've come around so many equations, and
Yeah.
I study engineering, and I understand that. And we still don't have an answer to it.
It's real. It's real. It's even used in tech. It's even used in equations, which are ultimately used in things such as engineering products like microwave ovens and so on. These are calculus is used on day in day out basis. They work. We know it works. We just don't know how. In other words, my dear friend, with infinite beings, some things which are otherwise not true or weird is actually true. That's a good point to start. With the Bible, unlike the Quran is a fantasy literature. No one experienced God to write this down. This is random literature, and I'll give you plenty of information. Don't disagree yet. Please don't disagree yet.
Let's listen to him. He might be wrong. I mean,
Sure.
I could be wrong.
So tell me, please. But I really want to go to the revelation in the Bible.
We can go, whatever.
With the revelation in the Bible, you have men and women who experience the supernatural. Supernatural, they experience. It's what is called revelation, true revelation. Many a times by way of public miracles, national miracles, Red Sea splitting, an entire nation saw. So when Moses wrote, he had the authority as someone who was clearly a man of God. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When Jesus said what he said, people could listen because he performed signs and wonders. With the Bible, the contributors to the Bible are people who worked signs and wonders, and some of them national miracles. And therefore, what is recorded in the Bible can be authentically called a revelation from God.
So
And the message,
everyone who wrote the Bible down, or wrote the first Bible, revelation. Revealed revelation.
no, the biblical community, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, were operating in a supernatural environment when they were writing things down.
And especially the main, can you lay down the difference between like the Quran and the Bible? Because
Sure.
to me, the way I understood it is that the Quran is the word of God. And that's the only difference from the Bible, because the Bible is the recitations by people written about, like witnesses.
But
So
and here is where I'd make this point very clear. The point is, in my careful analysis, I understand the Bible was written in an environment of supernatural signs and wonders. The Quran wasn't. Nothing by way of a public miracle. No one can testify.
Splitting of the moon,
The splitting of the moon.
when water gushed from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's fingers, when he healed Abu Bakr.
Where do you find? Where is this? How is this?
yeah, but that's
historically?
hadith. That's not the Quran. You know, Muhammad doesn't
fine.
have, like, at least to my secular religion, Muhammad doesn't have any other miracle other than the Quran. So that is
And the
that is
splitting of the
Muhammad's.
moon is in the Quran.
Sorry.
The splitting of the moon
I'll
is
come
in
to the
Quran.
splitting of the moon
It
in a
doesn't
moment.
explicitly say Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but
I'll come to the splitting of the moon in a moment. But do you appreciate, like what the gentleman was saying, the other things are not from contemporary literature. You know how myths are formed.
yeah.
Over a period of time, centuries, people, you see a
But
gentleman.
These are authentic hadiths,
Hadiths were written with centuries later.
but they were
But
passed down oral tradition.
But if it's so
How do
authenticated,
you
why
know?
do we reject them?
How do you know?
I'm culturally Shia. Why do we reject them? I'm not talking about me. I'm not Shia, me personally, but culturally,
I don't agree
why
with the
people
Shia.
reject that?
I don't agree with the Shia.
So please explain.
But that's not the point. The
Take one
point
exa-
is
one
the point
second.
is you have millions of people who are disagreeing with that hadith, even though you're saying it's authenticated. If it's authenticated, everyone should
you
believe
have
in it.
millions of people who disagree with the Bible. Doesn't mean the Bible's false.
Sure.
Yeah,
like you,
right?
Like you.
I
Even though
agree,
You've
but-
said what you've said about the Trinity. It doesn't mean the Bible is
So-
wrong.
so you-
Of course.
I encourage you to please get in touch, privately. Don't let anyone else know. Privately, if you please get in touch. I'd like to have a Zoom conversation about the Trinity. Now, my dear friend, the hadiths were written centuries later, even according to Islamic claim. Like the gentleman says, Shias don't even take the Sunni hadiths as
Yeah.
authentic. And of course, you as a Sunni, currently, wouldn't take Shia hadiths as authentic.
Of course he does.
And therefore, you need to now think through a little bit more and respond
So-
to me.
so-
For example,
sorry,
Sahih al-Bukhari, for example. Why do you think Sahih al-Bukhari is authentic history?
Because of the science of hadith, I'm not too knowledgeable with science of hadith, but what my understanding is that there was oral tradition. Teacher taught this person. We have their whole life story, all of this, and eventually it was written down.
When?
When was Sahih Bukhari written down?
Centuries later.
So
Yes,
may
that's
I
fine.
ask a simple question?
One second.
Sorry.
Sahih al-Bukhari was written centuries later.
205 years later.
Do you know when the claims that there were oral traditions actually made?
No.
There's no evidence for a claim of an oral tradition before these things were written.
Of hadith.
No one claimed. In other words, even the claim that there were oral traditions.
Why would they claim that if the book wasn't there?
Why would they what?
Why would they claim that there's oral tradition of the book if the book isn't been written yet or compiled?
If there is an oral tradition, you would need to have evidence for the fact that there was, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We have evidence.
What is the evidence?
The evidence is that it's clear that it's been passed down from teacher to teacher.
How is it clear?
Verbally.
Because we have
How is it clear?
Sahih
You're just
Bukhari. That's
claiming.
how.
My dear friend, what's your name? Hendrix. Merely adding claim after claim, you know what the word claim is, as opposed to evidence. Evidence is where you show a historical document or some archaeological artifact or something, That's evidence. That's how the Bible operates.
Yes.
To establish the authenticity of the Bible, I can give you archaeological artifacts, literary historical artifacts. That's how history works. Merely having 10 claims so far, and to justify those 10 claims, if you add 2 more claims, that's not history. So I'm going to ask you again, how do you know How do you know? What evidence can you use to I understand that there was an oral tradition pre Sahih al-Bukhari being written down? How do you know?
Sahih Bukhari itself is the evidence. Because otherwise, where did Sahih Bukhari get this information? How is it verified?
He sat in his loo and wrote down.
He just wrote.
Yeah, why not?
And
That's how myths are made.
there's no contradictions within the writings.
What hell, you think there's no
Oh, there is.
contradiction? There are plenty of contradictions.
May I answer that?
I can
quickly?
show you a number of Sahih al-Bukhari alone disagrees as to when the Quran was written down. Did you know? Sahih al-Bukhari alone says, for example, the Quran was written
Disagrees
down.
with who?
Sorry, what?
Who does Sahih Bukhari disagree with about the Quran was being written down? Like,
Yeah, with himself. Sahih al-Bukhari has contradictory stories as to who wrote down the Quran. The Quran as a
Because
book,
it was
as a
written
down book.
on many decades. Sahih Bukhari wasn't written on like 5 years and that's it. It was written by almost 20 different scholars.
No one has a clue as to who Sahih al-Bukhari is. Bukhari is. No one has a clue.
the same as no one has a clue who Paul is.
That's not the case. Now, please listen to me, please. Don't play ping pong. Please, in relation to Islam, and like I said, I can explain to you the Bible separately, and I'll spend hours and hours with you, my dear friend Hendrix. And I'm really looking at you. I'm 40 years old. You're 16, and you are a lovely young man. But some people can treat you as gullible. Instead of giving you information and insight, they can protect you. And therefore, when you go home, please bear in mind, even if they are right, let's say you are right, Islam is right, there is no harm in hearing me out.
Of course.
Yeah? And if anyone prevents you, don't give in. If anyone prevents you, if you are right in Islam being true, the more conversations you have with Christians,
The better.
you will only be more sure. You see what I'm saying? So please, I urge you to get in touch based on the email. Now my point is this, Hendrix. I'm going to repeat. I started off assuming Sahih al-Bukhari is a historical literature. Do you know how many manuscripts exist for Sahih al-Bukhari?
No.
In the entire history? There are about 10 manuscripts. How many people could have, if there are 10 extant manuscripts of Sahih al-Bukhari, how many could have even read the book in history?
How many could have read the book?
In history, yeah, in history. No, not today. I'm talking about, let's say, until a couple of hundred years ago, how many could even have read the book until the printing press was introduced? Let's say 5 centuries
There
ago.
was only 10 versions, then not many people.
Exactly. So no one would have had a clue as to this book. Who knows when it was written? Who knows by whom it was written? Who knows who even read the book at the time of the writing? Who knows if anyone verified and if anyone had access to verify any information which is there? No one has a clue. It has to be treated as a literature which exists, but not as literature which gives us history. You need to, you know what I'm talking about? So, and that is the history of Sahih al-Bukhari. About 10 manuscripts, pre-printing, about 10 manuscripts. No one has a clue who wrote this. Do you know do you know what historical resource can be used to fix the writer of Bukhari in Uzbekistan? Do you know what history can fix him there? So we know this is a historical person who wrote this at this time. Do you know any details?
No.
There's nothing. There's nothing. All of this is one myth after another myth after another myth. For now. So in other words, no one has a clue who wrote this. No one has a clue when it was written, why. No one.
Okay.
But for a moment, let's pretend, just to keep the conversation going, let's pretend that Sahih al-Bukhari was written by someone as claimed by the Muslims 3 centuries after Muhammad. Let's pretend that is the case. Yeah. 28, yeah. Let's pretend that is the case. Maybe we'll stop and start 1 second, brother. So we don't lose. Yeah. Okay, now we start again. And we'll go until maybe 18 or something. Maybe, 18 or something. So let's pretend for a moment, just to keep the conversation, just so you understand, it's not just these problems. Islam entirely is a problem. There's nothing historical about Islam. So let's pretend Sahih al-Bukhari is historical. Let's pretend. Now tell me, what is the evidence? So let's say Sahih al-Bukhari was written 3 centuries after Muhammad died. Let's say that is true. We'll take it as truth. Now tell me, what is the evidence that anyone has that this gentleman, whoever, if one, I don't know, but let's pretend one, if he actually traveled across the Islamic region, Hijazi and so on, to actually speak to people there, is there any evidence?
I'm not sure.
There's none. Who knows? Who is this fellow? Why he wrote? There's no evidence that he went anywhere. Even if we assume that he actually went to the Hijazi, do we have any evidence as to which historical people? I don't mean names. Names anyone can give. At the time of writing, people can invent names. Yeah. But that doesn't make history. If you invent names, that's not history. Is there any evidence to place any of the characters used in Sahih Bukhari as historical people based on evidence, archaeological or literature?
I don't think so.
There's nothing. There's nothing whatsoever. There's nothing whatsoever. And maybe I'll ask one more thing, just on this line. Do you have any evidence for the fact that Islam generally from the 7th century actually had some sort of an oral tradition which was going on? Any evidence at all?
What, for Quran or for
Anything.
Hadith?
Anything.
For Quran, we have lots.
Like what? What evidence have you got? That there was an oral tradition.
But there was an oral tradition. We have many manuscripts saying that people, well, not manuscripts, we have many things that people have passed down.
Like what?
Like the Quran itself,
Dear friend,
before it was even written.
you're claiming many Quran was passed down. It's a claim. What's the evidence?
I'm not sure the evidence. I'm not gonna
There's
lie.
none. There's none. I'll tell you something. I'll give you a few interesting examples, by the way. The Quran itself, do you know that Quran itself, both to itself and to the Jewish literature, refer to them as scripture, i.e. written documents. Do you know this?
Refer to what?
The Quran refers to both itself and Jewish, the pre-Quranic
Oh, right,
literature.
As written
As
documents.
written documents. If the Quranic environment was an oral environment, why would it refer to these books as written books? Kitab, books.
Because they were written.
Yeah, good. So it wasn't an oral tradition. They were written. They were written right from the start. Now, I'll give you one more example. The Quran actually, in a particular place, the Quran talks about the Hijrah. The Quran talks about going and fighting jihad and so on. And somewhere it actually mentions that these fighters, when they go to fight, they should actually, if they are going to debt, owe money to each other or something, they should write it down using the help of scribes. Did you know this?
That they what?
That they should write down the fact that you owe something, you borrowed money from him.
You have to write it.
You should write it down, the Quran says.
Yeah.
If it was an oral tradition, why do you have to write anything down?
For the most
we can-
important book
We
to
can
them
write-
is
we
the
can-
Quran. So they write their transactions, but they don't write the Quran.
Yeah.
To me, that
so simple. In
that-
other words, if I
that's a
borrowed
very
5 pounds
legitimate
from
question,
you,
yeah.
Hendrix, if I borrowed
But
5 pounds
the
from
Quran
you,
was already written.
no,
Yeah,
I'm
then-
talking about no.
We can have
My dear
oral
friend,
and
please.
scripture.
No, please listen. The Quran has text that says, in the Quran, when they were writing the Quran, they say, if you borrow money, write it down.
That's fine.
I can show you if you want.
That's fine.
No, it exists.
How
What's
is it
wrong with
fine?
that?
How is it fine?
If I borrow money, I should write down that I borrowed money.
Yeah, why?
What's the issue?
Well, even the Quran isn't written down. Why should you write down some silly 5 pound
The
borrowing?
Quran was written down.
Was
It
written.
was written.
Yeah?
Then
In
there
other
is
words,
no
it
point
wasn't
of
an oral
oral.
tradition.
You can have both.
But
Why would you have?
if there is an oral tradition, why would anyone insist? Let's say I borrowed 5 pounds. I'll keep it simple. Yeah. If I were to borrow 100 pounds from you, let's say we are friends. We have been friends for 10 years. If I were to borrow 100 pounds from you, would you say, hey, write it down on a paper? Would you do that?
Does the Quran
It depends.
say?
No. Would you do that?
Yes.
Between friends, you would do this.
Between friends, yes.
You would do.
I would do.
Okay. So, why would you do?
Because the Quran says so.
Forget about the Quran. I'm talking about today, ignoring the Quran.
So I
if I
can
were to
remember-
borrow 100 pounds from
So I
you.
can remember how much you borrowed off of me.
So, in other words, you don't have memory enough to remember. You have to write it down. Yeah.
I have the memory too,
So, why should I write it down?
but just to ensure. What? Just to ensure.
Just to be sure. In
Yeah.
other words, you don't have the memory enough.
You could say that, yes.
Yeah. So for 100 pounds, you take it too seriously that you don't have the memory enough to remember, and therefore you want to make sure you write it down.
However, for the
And
word
you were
of
saying
God,
for the Quran, you don't do it?
We did write. The Quran was written down though.
Yeah, in other words, the oral, the claim that in other words, the written literature is what
But that's
matters.
different than borrowing money.
It's much more important or much less important?
It's much more important.
And therefore you better write it down, which
Exactly.
even more importance. Cool. So, do you have any evidence that there was an oral tradition at all? I given you evidence for the fact that there was a written tradition.
Outside of the Quran and Hadiths, I don't know.
No, even inside.
can I-
Inside. Use anything,
Inside?
but use contemporary. Don't give me later fantasy ideas. Use contemporary to explain that in the 7th century, the environment was oral tradition. You know, people memorized. You know, they say people memorized and so on. Yeah. Any evidence?
Every Ramadan, they would recite the whole Quran.
Claim. That's a claim. Evidence.
Can I also say something else? I mean, you know, we have different readings for the Quran, right? It isn't just one Quran.
Hafs, Warsh.
Sorry?
What, like Hafs and Warsh?
I don't get that. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Like different
Readings, different
Hafs,
Qurans.
Hafs and Warsh.
Yes, but not only that. You know, like in some areas in
Maybe
Yemen
I'll
as
even
well.
come there later because this one, the point I'm making.
No, because the point would be that I'm making, if they're having different readings for different words, that means they didn't hear them. It was written to them. And
they have
had
other
to-
fantasy stories to fill that gap. They have other fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
I
that
want
was
to keep this
surprising.
simple. So I've given you evidence for written tradition. Do you have any evidence for oral tradition? Any evidence?
Oral tradition, no.
Yeah. You have no evidence. Yeah. I'll give you some simple example. Yeah. You know how an oral tradition would look like. Yeah. Can you imagine? If there is a teacher of reciter of the Quran, whoever, and there are 100 students who are learning to memorize the Quran from him. You know what kind of archaeological evidence or historical evidence would survive? You know, this is like a school, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is like a school. There should be evidence for the fact that there were teachers who were teaching, reciting and teaching. We should be able to find some evidence.
This is not formal school. This is people sit down with some student's mother, and they all learn Quran.
Yeah. But unless in other words, Hendrix, I'm going to the reason I'm asking. How do you know this wasn't made up?
I don't know. It wasn't made up.
In other words, you might be following a very made up story today.
It could be.
Yeah, that's a danger.
Of course, that's a
It's
danger.
a very real danger. This is not respectable at all in multiple different ways, Hendrix. I'll tell you something, yeah? Because we were dealing with history, I'll just stick to history. I'll go to morality later. I alluded to morality, respectable. I'll go to that later. Hopefully through God's grace later when you get in touch. But let's stick to history. In terms of history, should we change, brother? 16, yeah, but maybe we'll change the battery. Give me 1 minute, yeah? I'll just help him change the battery. Please, 1 minute. Hendrik, so let's do this again. I'll give you a history insight here. Islam, roughly, if I can give you the storyline, this is the claimed storyline. Claimed storyline that Muhammad was born in Mecca. Muhammad was based in Mecca. Qurayshi family, Mecca based. And that in Mecca there were pagan Meccan Arabs. And Muhammad suddenly said, hey, look, I received a revelation in the Hira, in the cave and so on. And then he wanted them all to become Muslim.
Yeah.
They didn't like it, they persecuted. And because of the persecution, after a few local tactics, he eventually had to flee, hijrah, to Medina. In Medina, there was an ummah, Islamic ummah, Medinan constitution, Medinan ummah. All took part in it, but at some stage, Muhammad got upset with the Jews and ended up wiping 3 Jewish tribes. 3 Jewish tribes wiped out in different ways, chased or killed or whatever. And after that, the Muslims now go to Mecca. After many things happen. I'm giving you the bare skeleton. He returns to Mecca. Eventually, takes over Mecca, 632 AD, and then passes away fairly soon after. This is the rough storyline.
Yeah.
Would you believe that for none of this major building blocks of the story, for none there exists, and let me add a couple more things. And then after Muhammad was gone, of course they have the new identity, Muslims, Muhammad as a prophet, and these are Muslims, and the religion is Islam. Caliphs take over. Caliphs take over. the Rashidun Caliphate, the first Caliphate. Rashidun Caliphate, the first one. Yeah,
Abu Bakr,
Abu Bakr, yeah, you do know this. So they take over, and then they left Hijazi, expanded Islam further, and then you have Umayyad Caliphate, and things progress from there. Would you believe, for none of these major building blocks, none of these is the positive corroboration. None. Including in the Quran. You can use the Quran. You won't find pagan Meccan Arabs. You will not. You will not. Please hear me out and then try and respond. For none of these major building blocks, there is historical positive corroboration. You can use any literature, but contemporary, in some way, shape or form, something which is qualified to talk about these things. You don't find any positive evidence. It doesn't stop there. You actually find plenty of negative evidence, contra evidence, to suggest to us all of this storyline is Mickey Mouse story. None of this is true. None whatsoever is true. Evidence based. In other words, God knows who wrote this book. God knows when it was written. God knows why it was written. And I'm talking about the true God. The true God. Because we clearly know, and therefore no wonder Sahih al-Bukhari was confused. He has at least 3 different versions as to when this was put together. 3 different versions. One he says Abu Bakr, one he says during the lifetime of Muhammad, it was already written down. Yeah. And 2 he says no, Abu Bakr wrote it down first time, brought it down first time, put it together first time. And then 3rd, Uthman put it together the first time. Which one do you believe? These are contradictory. It can't be all 3.
Writing it down and compiling it is different.
No, I'm talking about writing it down.
Writing it down?
Yeah, well, in one place he says Muhammad wrote it down first.
But Muhammad never wrote it.
But Sahih al-Bukhari says that.
Sahih al-Bukhari said Muhammad wrote it.
Yes, it was. Sahih al-Bukhari says, no, let me be careful. Sahih al-Bukhari says that when Muhammad passed away, it was already a book. Meaning, whoever wrote, I'm not saying who wrote it, but whoever wrote it, it was written already by the time he passed away.
Yeah.
In other words, by the time he was passing away,
There is
people
a
can
Quran.
say, look, there is a Quran.
Yeah.
But later on he says there was no Quran when Abu Bakr was ruling, which is clearly later.
Yes.
Yeah, Abu Bakr was ruling later. But he says when Abu Bakr was ruling, there was no Quran, and they had to write it down. And then elsewhere he says, well, when Uthman compiled the Quran. And
This is the most acceptable hadith among Muslims, that actually Uthman wrote, compiled. And
So you have contradictory accounts. Yeah, but you see the point. So you were a little bit hesitant earlier when I said all of the building blocks. None of the building blocks has positive evidence. All of them have negative evidence. Remember, you had a little bit of this. What, do you have any positive evidence or?
What, that there was pagan Arabs that.
Yeah, pagan Meccan Arabs, for example. Yeah, is that what you had in mind? If that's what you had in mind.
I don't see
Yeah.
how there isn't evidence for pagan Arabs.
Pagan Meccan Arab. Pagan Meccan.
I don't know if
What
there's
evidence have
any
you got?
clear evidence outside of Quran or Hadith.
Sorry, come again?
I don't know if there's any clear evidence outside of Quran or Hadith.
Use anything, including the Quran. Is there any evidence that the pagan
In
Meccan
the Quran,
Arabs?
I don't believe it talks about.
Sorry,
actually,
come again?
In the Quran, I do believe it mentions pagan Arabs.
Meccan. Pagan Meccan.
Meccan? I don't think it says Meccan.
Mecca, that is important. Because who were the people who chased him away from Mecca?
The pagans.
Pagan Meccan. They are based in Mecca. But if the Quran doesn't talk about any Meccan-based pagan Arabs, then you have an issue.
But surely we could assume that it's talking about Meccan.
Where? How could? Do you know how many times the word Mecca even shows up in the Quran?
I don't know if the word Mecca shows up many times.
Do you know how many times it shows
No,
up in the
I'm not
Quran?
sure.
Once.
Okay.
Once. Who knows where this book was written?
And it wasn't even written Mecca, it was written Becca.
No, that was the another one. So there
That
are
was
two.
another one.
Yeah,
Okay,
there are
sorry,
two.
yeah.
In one place it uses the word Baka, Valley of Baka,
Which is in
in
the
Jerusalem,
area of
going into Jerusalem, and in another place and so that is in Mecca. It's Becca, and
Where does
there's
it
only,
say Becca?
what's that?
Where does it say Becca?
Why does it?
Where?
Oh, I can get for you if you want. I need to
Okay,
find the
please.
reference. But that's not the main story. The main story is what we're talking about, which is very simply that for pagan Meccan Arabs, there's no evidence whatsoever, even in the Quran.
So basically, what you're saying is that the Quran could be generated in a different area with different events.
For all that we know, this could be Los Angeles. I'm joking, of course. Not
Yeah,
Los Angeles. Some Arab, some maybe
Definitely
somewhere.
not Los Angeles.
Not Los. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Good
Yeah,
point.
so of different cities who are destroyed by God in Jordan. Like, why would you recite such an example? And you told people, hey, you see it every day. So clearly that ayah or that verse is talking to different people, not to Hijazis or Arabs.
Exactly. In other words, my dear friend, this book is a fantasy book. No one,
It's still we could consider it a valuable book. It doesn't mean that.
I'll come to the morality part later, but I consider this deeply immoral. Based on some specific points, I'll come to that later. Deeply immoral, very exceptionally immoral. But I'll come to that later. Immoral.
Yes,
anti-moral.
I agree with that.
So no value in that regard.
Valuable doesn't mean something
in
is moral.
terms of understanding history.
We have to understand a lot of things, right? I mean, to be honest, like I hate the Nazis and I hate to mention them, but I consider Mein Kampf as a valuable book just to
Historical
understand
reasons.
the mind of. So I don't mean it's moral.
But do you see what I'm saying, Hendrix? This one, so I would have normally said,
Thank you so much.
good to see you.
Cheers, man.
God
Thank you
bless
so much. Wish you all the best.
Normally I would have said, no one has a clue. Actually, that's not true. I'm writing a book right now based on detailed research on this. This book, there is no evidence to suggest that Islam began in the way people claim it began. There's no evidence to suggest that at all. No evidence whatsoever. No positive evidence.
But why would there be evidence in the middle of a desert? Why would there be evidence?
There better be. Otherwise, you're following blindly.
So you're saying just because there's no evidence.
2 points, Hendrix. Number one, if there is no evidence, whether it is desert or elsewhere, if there is no evidence, you are following blindly. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Do you understand? Do you like blind belief? Believing something blindly?
No.
No, clearly. So there better be evidence because you want to follow it.
Yeah.
So there better be evidence. That's point number one. Point number two, in the middle of the desert, there are thousands of inscriptions. There's much known about the Hijazi. So Islam could have easily, if there are caliphs, that's pretty much like an emperor, yeah? So massively, they not alone had political control, they had religious control. Phenomenal power. There better be proper evidence for them. There is none whatsoever.
There's no evidence for caliphs.
No evidence. So for the Rashidun Caliphate, no evidence.
I'll have to do research.
Please.
I'll have to do
When you do research, don't give into a claim where they say, oh, look, this is Umar's sword and stuff. Don't give in. You need written, because in any sword that they show today and say this is Muhammad's sword, they can claim anything, yeah. Or sandals, they show sandals, they show maybe teeth. Don't give in. It could have been anyone's teeth. You need written evidence, writings either on the pre-paper material, parchments and so on, or writings on rocks, which is archaeology, or other archaeological artifacts. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What I'm going to suggest to you today is no. Islam is a typical myth. And that is exactly why Sunnis have their own ideas, Shias have their own ideas. They don't.
That's also the same with almost any belief. Like different Christians have different ideas, different Hindu have different ideas.
No, different Christians have different ideas in relation to the history of Jesus. No.
The history of Jesus, the Ebionites, the Ebionites and the Nazarenes.
Is there any evidence for the Ebionites?
For the Ebionites?
Yeah.
For the Nazarenes there is.
No, Ebionites. Is there any evidence?
I'm not sure if there's evidence for Ebionites.
These are figments of imagination from later times. Don't give in, please. Hendrix, if you remember one word from here, you know what that word should be?
What?
Evidence. Evidence. Anyone can tell you any story. Look, I told you a story, yeah? I told you, for instance, that idolatry didn't exist. I told that. It's a claim.
Yeah.
To back it up, what did I do? I pointed out to research scholars, Dr. Ahmad Al-Jalal, Leila Navy, Michael McDonald. And I pointed out to the research area, rock inscriptions across Hijazi. When you email, I can pass to you specific links, for example, of YouTube videos or research articles, if you like, which show this. It's a solid fact today. Muslims don't learn these things because they don't care about evidence and history much. But you should. Yeah? So the Quran is a baseless literature. I'm talking about historicity. Baseless. Everything stands against this, historically. I'm talking about history right now. Morality is even worse. Phenomenally worse. I'll ask you a simple example of this. As someone who's grown up here, you've grown up here. As someone who's grown up here, would you ever want to, when you grow up, or let's say you consider your father or something, I don't want to make it personal, but please maybe consider some other gentleman and his father. Would you want the father, let's say an adopted son, would you want the father to take the adopted son's wife ever?
The adopted son's wife?
Yeah.
No.
No. This is what Muhammad did. Or whoever contributed to this. Who knows who that is? That person did the same thing. Adopted son's wife was taken as a wife.
But the wife cannot have more than one husband.
Not at one time, in this case. So, he
Divorced is different. Divorce is different.
You don't mind if a father makes his son divorce his wife and then makes that...
If he makes him divorce the wife, it is different, of course.
Let's
Because
say,
you cannot
let's
should
ignore
not.
the makes it part. In this case, he did make it, but let's ignore the makes it part. Even otherwise, is it okay to take son's wife?
If they divorce, then I would say it's fine.
Are you sure?
it's
Son's
fine.
wife?
Son's ex-wife,
Son's ex-wife?
I would say it's fine.
In your mind, will she ever be anything other than your daughter?
Well, she's not. She's not my daughter though, she's my daughter-in-law.
Yeah, daughter-in-law. Will she ever be? No, this is where you need to put yourself in the shoes of a father. Father. I have a son, a little one, growing up. He's back at home right now. Would I ever look at my son's wife as someone? Good to see. As someone I could even consider. Would I ever want to do that? No. Absolutely not. I can't imagine a more filthy mind. Simply can't.
But I would say that if they are not married, it is fine.
Son's wife, even if they are divorced and wanders away, you know how I'll treat her? As my daughter-in-law for the rest of my life.
Okay.
I know they are divorced, and it's a heartbreaking thing that they are divorced. Maybe I would have advised my best to make sure they're not divorced. Heartbreaking. But if that's what they have done, I'd still want to treat that girl as my daughter-in-law. My son does something, that's fine. That's what he does. My daughter-in-law. Would I ever want to marry and have sex with that lady? In my mind, that's filthy. That's the value we've learned. This is just one example I'm giving.
Yeah.
One example. There are multiple
I
other
would not say
examples.
that's immoral.
Come again?
I would not say that's immoral.
Hendrix, I'd like to comment to you. Very, very important. For the sake of religion, don't bend morality. Please don't.
But where else do you
Ask
get
her.
morality other than religion? And
From
even
true religion, you get morality.
even outside of religion or true religion or anything,
Hendrix,
I would say this is moral.
from true religion, from true God, you get morality. I completely agree.
In the Bible, does it say that you cannot marry your son's ex-wife?
Where?
In the Bible, does it say that you?
Of course.
Where does it say this?
This is very obvious. I can show you later if you want.
Can you bring me now?
Not right now.
Not right now.
Hendrix, if you let me put it this way, if you even want to go through some text to understand this, I'm terrified. I'm really terrified as to what has happened to you. If you even want to read some text to come to this conclusion, what I'm going to say is that's a big area to research, area to discuss about, which I'm willing to discuss with you about morality. Deep area. We'll come to that later. But can I please just leave you with the history discussion I've had so far? Okay? Did you have any question about the Bible? Did you want to discuss the Trinity part briefly, or should we do that also
For me,
later?
I would just like not even biblical, just Trinity itself, I would say, how can the Father eternally beget the Son, and the Son still be God?
Son still?
And the Son still be God?
Son still be God.
Yeah.
So, okay, I can explain. Now, before I go there, do we both appreciate that the Father and the Son in the triunity of God, the fact that one is a Father, another is a Son, has nothing whatsoever to do with relationships as we understand in this world?
It's in the sort of cross, yeah.
Yeah, it's not sexual. It's not based on reproduction. It's not based on reproduction. You understand that? Yeah. So the fact that he is a son is not based on reproduction, and
It's
nothing.
metaphorical.
Yeah, it's metaphorical. Very simply, in the triunity of God, what we understand is revelation. How do we get to know God? How does anyone get to know God? The nature of God. Can you try and figure out from looking from here? You can't. Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is God a male, a female? I won't have a clue from here. Yeah. With no further information, I won't have a
I
clue.
would say that logically, you would have to conclude that there is a God and there is one God.
Well, based on yeah.
Based on logic, even without scripture.
Sure. Yeah. So there can be some. Yeah, absolutely. So without getting into scripture, we can already conclude a few things, but still through proper reasoning in relation to one God, what his nature would be, we can make actually further comments. That he is personal, he's a
Personal
relational and so on. Personal being, relational, omnipotent, omniscient. You don't even have to go to scripture before concluding these things. Completely agree.
Yeah.
But still, it's not easily concluded.
Yeah.
It's not without any work. You have to think through to arrive at these conclusions. Completely agree. Yeah. So once you've done and arrived at that conclusion, now beyond that, to understand his nature, beyond that, does he sit on a throne? Does he stand up? Does he walk? Does he not walk? Can he eat? Can he not eat? I'm not talking about ability. I'm talking about his interests. What does he do?
Yeah.
To understand these things, you will have to go through scripture. Yeah. And not any scripture, but something which is validated scripture. Validated revelation. And that is where the previous point I made, which is the Bible is validated to be supernatural in its origin. Because the Bible was written down in the environment of supernatural signs and wonders.
Okay.
Yeah?
I would agree.
Yeah.
The Injil,
Not the
Gospel of
Quran.
Jesus.
Not the Quran. The Quran is not, like I said earlier, the entire history, the entire claim of history of the Quran is wrong. We have evidence to suggest that none of this is true.
I'll have to do research.
Sure.
then
Now,
I'll-
in relation to the moon splitting that you mentioned about, Surah 53 or 55 or something,
I believe so. Yeah.
have you actually checked if it is an event that happened at that time?
I do know that it was not recorded by anyone outside of Mecca or Medina at that time. But my argument against that would be that it's evidence for them.
But that's not even the question I'm asking. Have you ever checked if that is the claim made in the Quran?
It does
actually
not
the moon
say
split.
Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It does say in the Quran, not moon split.
Which surah is that? Do you remember off the top of your head? I can
bring.
Yeah, if you please. Or I can get it from my notes. It's either 53 or 55 or something. Or should I find it?
Should
Sorry.
be. It's here. It's here. 54 verse 1.
54. I checked 53, I checked 55.
The hour has been drawn near and the moon has been split in two.
Yeah. So why do you think this is talking about a historical event?
Why do I think that?
Why do you think this is talking about a historical event?
Because it says the moon has been split in two.
Yeah, but it also says the hour has come near. Do you know what that hour is?
Could be referring to Day of Judgment.
Yeah. Essentially, it's in relation to, the claim is in relation to the Day of Judgment. And it's simply saying the Day of Judgment has come near and the moon has split. So it's referring to something which is...
But it also says after that, if they see a sign, they turn away.
Yeah. The Quran talks about even at the end how people see signs and they turn away. So the point here is this text. This is why you need to even go through the tafsirs if you like. This text is normally read as descriptive of, Quranic description of what happens at the end. The hour has come, now the moon has split. Everything, the Quran says heaven split, moon split, everything split and so on. A few different similar details. So that's how this ought to be normally read. Why do you read this as a historical event?
Why do I read it as a historical event? Because that's what I've been informed by scholars.
Anyone can tell you anything, but look at the text and tell me why. You have the text there.
I don't know.
But we can read right now, yeah? The hour has come near, and you and I agree that the hour there relates to the end.
But how do we know that it relates to the end?
Well, we can do a search for similar expressions all over the Quran. It talks about how the hour has arrived. The hour has arrived. Yeah, it all relates to the end. Yeah, judgment. The hour has come near. And it's approached, and the moon has split.
Yeah.
So it's really describing what happens when the hour has come upon you.
But this doesn't, whether the moon split or not. How is the Quran a miracle? Because it's a miraculous book. How? Because of the literary techniques, the oral transition, the words used, all of these things.
Forget about oral transmission. How is this book a miracle?
Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam could not write or read.
How do you know?
This is hadiths, tafsir, all these things.
Later fantasy ideas we're not dealing with it. So in relation to early artifacts, how do you know? You are suggesting the Quran itself is a miracle, and that is revelatory of the fact that you have already gone through, already have given into brainwashing. You have been brainwashed to a certain degree.
I'll say everyone's brainwashed.
I know how to ask questions, and I know how to find answers, and when the answers don't match up with claims, I know how to give up. So please don't say. I'm telling you about you. Very simply, you said earlier that the Quran has been, the Quran itself is a miracle. Why do you say this?
Literary techniques.
Explain. Okay. Let's stick to that one point. Explain. What literary techniques in the Quran?
I'm going to assume that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam couldn't read or write.
Don't assume.
I'll let you assume.
What's that?
I'll let you assume.
Where did I assume?
You said that assuming that it's not your that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't force his son to divorce the wife. You assumed.
I wanted to make it lenient for you.
So even without saying he could not read or write, I don't believe a man could write the Arabic script for this.
Explain. So explain to me why you think a man could not write the Arabic in the Quran. Do you know Arabic?
No, I don't know Arabic. I'm learning Arabic.
How can you even say this then?
I'm learning Arabic.
What's that?
I'm learning Arabic slowly.
Yeah, so you're learning Arabic.
Yes.
Why? Note carefully, the brainwashing is very important.
Again, scholars.
1 second, Hendrix. You're only learning right now. So while you're still learning, how did you take up this idea on board that the Arabic in the Quran is wonderful?
I'll say because there's no contradictions.
No, contradiction is a different idea. Contradiction has
That's
to
the
do with
literary
logical
techniques.
message. You were talking about literary style earlier.
Yeah.
What about literary style of the Quran makes you think that this is a miracle?
I can't bring things like
It's
that.
a brainwashed idea. People have been brainwashing you, and you've taken on board conclusions which are baseless, weird, has no merit whatsoever. Can you, let me put it this way, can you, at best, let's say you read Shakespeare, would you ever, in your wildest dreams, suddenly say Shakespeare in itself is a miracle? In the purest sense of miracle, the literal sense. Of course you wouldn't. Even if it is a beautiful literature, you wouldn't, yeah?
Yeah.
No man in his right thinking is going to read the best of literature that he can read and ever going to claim that that is a miracle. He may say, well, that's well-written literature.
I would disagree.
What do you mean?
Because
So tell me.
Quran is perfect written literature.
Perfect in what?
Perfect literature.
Explain.
It's perfect.
In what way?
Perfect. There is no contradictions.
Look, contradiction is a different thing.
Show me contradictions.
Hendricks, please listen. Contradiction is a different area which corresponds to logical message. We're talking about literary style. I'm talking about literary style right now. Style of, you can write utter junk and still be writing very eloquently, yeah? You can eloquently communicate some utter nonsense. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the style, literary style. What about the Quran is miraculous in terms of the literary style?
In terms of the literary style, I don't know. I don't know.
So, okay. In other words, when you said earlier that in terms of literary style it's a miracle, is a brainwash point. You need to come out of the brainwashing. Now let's talk about contradiction. Who told you there is no contradiction in the Quran? Have you ever read the Quran completely?
Of course, I've read the Quran many times.
Yeah, sure. So are you going to claim that the Quran doesn't have contradictions at all?
Yes.
Are you sure about this?
Yes.
Okay. So in relation to the Quran, if I showed you a few characters.
You can't talk to me.
No, my dear friend, please. Listen. Excuse me. Don't, my dear friend, don't let them brainwash you. Do not let them brainwash you.
Run away!
Do not let them brainwash you, my friend.
Do the dash. What's the guy? That's 5 in the day.
Don't let them brainwash you. Hendricks, don't let them brainwash you. These are Muslims who are only experts in brainwashing. Don't let them brainwash you. Look at them. Like a bunch of hyenas. I asked many questions, none of them would come and answer. Now they are here to just take the...